Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, Week 8 SEC preview. This is the first week of the year. We have got all 16 teams in the SEC playing conference games. 8 SEC versus SEC matchups. It's taken a long time to get here. It's the middle of October, but we finally get a full slate of SEC matchups. There are some really good games this week. There are some that are going to be boring, but there are some disgusting ones, including one in Jordan-Hare that I cannot make any sense of, but we'll get to that one in a little bit. Let's just dive right into this, because I think this could be a pretty consequential week. We could maybe see 2 coaches lose their jobs this week if the games don't go their way. We'll see what happens. We'll get into it later, but let's get off going here. Texas A&M at Arkansas. A&M is favored by 7.5. Total is 61.5. Arkansas has the 6th best offense in yards per game in the country. Like, this offense is incredible. Taylor Green at quarterback, guys like Mike Washington, Omega Blake at the skill positions. A&M's defense, however, is 19th. Right, so this is it's a good-on-good matchup with Arkansas's offense versus A&M's defense. And this is Bobby Petrino's first home game as the interim here. And for Arkansas, they really could have beaten Tennessee on the road last week. They just couldn't hold on to the ball. They fumbled the ball 3 times, which is credit to Tennessee's defense for forcing those fumbles. But fumbles are not a consistent, reliable stat, right? Because once that ball pops out, it can bounce anywhere. And they just happen to keep bouncing in Tennessee's favor. So the Vols got some big turnovers on defense to win that game. But Arkansas was right there. Only lost the game by 3. And for A&M, this is just the ultimate rat poison spot for a team. Because now they're the SEC favorites. They're 6-0. They've turned a corner. Look at how cool they are. Look how pretty they are. Now they have to go on the road and play against an interim coach. It's disgusting. It's such a disgusting spot for A&M. And for the Aggies, Le'Veon Moss, their running back, is out for what Elko quoted as a significant period of time. How is that going to hurt their ground game? Because A&M has, Ruben Owens is still there. Marcel Reed is still there to run the ball around. But it's going to really test the depth of A&M's running game. Now, the offensive line is great. I do believe that most guys are able to run the ball effectively behind that offensive line. But can they run it to an elite level to where you can win a conference game on the road? Because Arkansas's total defense, it is the worst in the SEC. They are the worst against the rush. They are the second worst in the conference against the pass. So realistically, A&M could play their B- game here and still put up a good bit of points. But on the road, you don't really want to play anything less than your A game because it is scary in this conference. Now, the total at 61.5, it's high. But with how good Arkansas's offense is and how bad their defense is going into this Aggies offense, I think going over, that could maybe be a little best bets watch. I do think A&M is able to go into Fayetteville and probably win a game. I'm not sure I'm comfortable laying the 7.5 just because, like Arkansas, I guess you could probably say they backdoored the Tennessee game. I mean, they only lost by 3. They lost like 10.5, but they were down by 17 in the second half of that game, right? But their offense is just so consistent. It's so explosive where they're able to come back. Laying over a touchdown against Arkansas is scary because of how good that offense is, but I do think A&M is able to avoid a total collapse here. I think they're able to win the game, but it would not shock me if this game is a little bit close. Now let's go to a game that I think is going to be totally disgusting. Texas at Kentucky. Texas laying 12.5 with a total at 42.5. Kentucky's offense is just horrible. They have the least first downs in the SEC by 13. They're the 5th worst in third down conversion rate. They have the 2nd worst passing offense and the 6th worst rushing offense. Oh, and by the way, you get to go against a Texas defense this year, which is 3rd in the SEC in total defense, 6th in passing, 2nd in rushing, 2nd in points allowed. I mean, Kentucky's team total is 14 in this game. That is also a best bets watch. We lost a team total last week betting on Texas under 20.5. We got beat by that punt return. I might go right back to it because Kentucky's offense in this game, I am very worried about their ability to get to 2 touchdowns. Like 10 or 14 points, I do believe is right where Kentucky will be. Now, in terms of the angle of this being a letdown spot for Texas, because they're just coming off the Red River, it was a big-time emotional win to, avoid going 3-3, take down Oklahoma, which always feels good, especially when Oklahoma is number 6 in the country and everyone thinks Texas is dead. I think that having a team that relies on defense, or at least prides themselves on defense, helps you to avoid letdowns a little bit better because defense will always travel. It will stay consistent. And their offense for Texas really hasn't been that great to begin with. So can they really even let me down? If they only score 17 offensive points in this game, is that even a letdown or is that just how Texas is at this point? Kentucky's defense is only above Arkansas's in total defense. They have the 3rd most points given up in the league with 1 less game played than most of the teams. Arch can handle that. We saw him make some big-time throws against Oklahoma, which might be the best defense in the country. So I'm not worried about Texas, being stifled by Kentucky. I think it'll be a low-scoring game just by the nature of these two teams. But I think that Texas is going to comfortably win this game. That's going to be pretty painful to watch. I think Kentucky barely scores. I think the total of 42.5 is at a good number. So give me Texas to avoid a letdown spot on the road. I think that Kentucky, they're probably a dead program. There'll be a good showing from the fans here because Texas is coming to town. But I think that they're going to be taken out of the game pretty early by how slow Kentucky's offense is. Give me Texas to win this game, probably by 2 scores. I think they cover the 12.5. Mississippi State at Florida. Florida's laying 8.5. Total is at 51.5. Mississippi State is rushing for 64 more yards per game than Florida is. That would almost make you think that Mississippi State was the team coming into this year that had all Americans on the offensive line, a running back who could be the best in the country, a deep running back room. That's Florida. Florida has Jake Slaughter and Arson Barber on the line. They have Jaden Ball and a bunch of blue chip guys behind him. State had none of that, and they're still finding ways to run the ball effectively, whereas Florida is not. And Mississippi State really came to play this year. They were inspired. They've come out and had some great performances. Florida just hasn't. But the downside of that for State is that Fluff Bothwell, their leading rusher, is doubtful after he was hurt at Texas A&M a few weeks ago. So Devon Booth, who was sort of Fluff Bothwell's change of pace back, he'll get most of the load now. He has 59 carries on the year for 266 and 4 scores, 4.5 yards per carry, so he's still a good option. But I kind of had the same question for the Mississippi State as I do for Texas A&M. Is the depth of that running back room where it needs to be, where you can be down your leading rusher in this case, and still run the ball effectively against a Florida front that has been solid against the run. They haven't been anything special, but they've been solid against the run. It is homecoming for Florida, so it should be a decent turnout despite everything that's going on with this program. And for the Gators, the offense just is what it is at this point. The scripts are going to be good to start the game. I don't know if you can rely on them to score more than 6 points once those scripts are done, because they don't make adjustments, the play calling gets predictable, and defenses are able to really just read and react to what they're seeing without much of a challenge. So if in my mind, this game comes down to, can Florida's defense limit Blake Shapen in what figures to be more of a passing attack for Mississippi State because you're down Fluff Bothwell? Napier should be out eventually, and that would really kill most teams' momentum and energy. But we've seen Florida rally around him, especially at home. Despite all the noise about Napier probably being fired, people are saying it might happen this weekend regardless of what happens because Scott Strickland, their ADs, met with boosters privately. There's a lot of buzz. This could be it. But I don't think we're going to see quit out of this Florida team because of what we've seen from them in the past. I think they're still going to come out inspired and fired up. Does that mean much? I'm not sure. But I do think that the Gators will win this game against Mississippi State on their homecoming at home. And I have in this note that it'll extend this nightmare for Gator fans. Maybe it won't, because I wrote this before all this buzz came out about this being Napier's last game regardless. We don't know how true that is. But I do have Florida winning this game against Mississippi State. I'm not sure I'd take them to cover 8.5, though. I'm just not sure I could, because Florida has shown me nothing where I can count on them to win a game by 2 scores against anybody. And Mississippi State is a resurgent Bulldogs team. This is not like Mississippi State of last year where this is just a horrible, sleeper team coming in. They're a solid squad. So I do think Florida wins this game. I would pick Mississippi State to cover right now, though, in what could be Napier's last game. Now, this next one, I don't know what to do. Missouri at Auburn. Missouri is laying 1.5. The total is 43.5. This opened up with Auburn favored by 1.5. It just crossed that bridge, just mirrored to now Missouri's favored by 1.5. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm not getting sick talking about this game. Here's the numbers of this game. Missouri, they gain 180 more yards per game offensively than Auburn. They throw for 70 more, run for 100 plus more per game. They're about 20% better on third down conversions. They give up about 80 yards less per game defensively. Auburn is the most flagged team in the SEC. Missouri is the least flagged team in the SEC. And the line is 1.5. It's a nightmare. Hugh Freeze, is he coaching for his job here? If Auburn loses this game, they would be 3-4 and 0-4 in conference. Is that it? Does the leeway end there if Hugh can't win this game at home against Missouri, In desperation, it's a crazy thing, especially at home. It is a scary thing for teams to have to go to a school who is desperate and dying for a win, and a coach who might be coaching for his job. And for Missouri, they're playing to really stay alive in the SEC race, and this game for them, I think, is important to keep them alive in the playoff race, because after this game, their hardest games after, they still have to go to Vandy, they host A&M, and they go to Oklahoma. They can't lose this game and then put themselves in a spot where they need to win all 3 of those. They have got to win this game at Auburn to allow themselves to drop one of those games against good teams, on the road at Vandy, at home to the Aggies, at Oklahoma. None of those are really bad losses in a vacuum, right? So they need to win this game to afford themselves a loss in one of those and still be alive in the playoff race. Auburn has been good against the run defensively, which is what Missouri wants and really needs to do. We saw Bama take away Ahmad Hardy in that running game last week, and Missouri's offense really struggled. Prbula looked overwhelmed. He threw multiple interceptions for the first time. Can Auburn score, though? Because Missouri's defense is one of the better ones in the SEC also, and that offense just hasn't looked good really ever. Outside of their opening game against Baylor, where Arnold ran all over them, they haven't looked good against any other quality opponent. I'm not betting $1 on this game. This is not getting any thought towards a best bet because that line is disgusting. It's a sports bettor's worst nightmare. For right now, I'll lean Missouri just because I think Auburn is cursed, but absolutely nothing would surprise me in this game. I don't even really want to make an official prediction. I'll just lean Missouri. Hold me to that if you want to, but this game is gross, and I have no idea where it's going to go because both teams, I think, need the spot really, really bad. Auburn desperation spot, Missouri trying to stay alive for the postseason. It's gross. It's gross, but it's what makes college football so great. Let's get into some of the higher caliber matchups here. We'll start in Nashville, Tennessee. LSU goes to Vandy. Vandy is favored over LSU. If I had told you that in the preseason, I would have gotten bullied off of every app I posted that take on. But Vandy laying 2.5, total is 48.5. Vandy is fresh off a bye, and they've gotten that time now to deal with their first loss of the year to Bama. They've got a chance to recalibrate, sort of calm down, and not get too emotional about dropping their first game. LSU is coming in off of what I think is a weak showing against South Carolina. The running offense is horrible. They had better yards per carry against Carolina. I'm not moved by being able to run the ball on that South Carolina front. I don't think they're very good. And Garrett Nussmeier, maybe it's just a health issue. Maybe he's just not very good. But he has not looked at all like the quarterback we thought he was going to be in the preseason. He has looked bad. And LSU's passing weapons out wide, they haven't been able to produce, whether that's because of their own, they can't create separation, the offensive line, or just Nussmeier. That passing game hasn't been there either. And their defense for LSU is being forced to win their games. How long can that go on for? Because I think it's going to be a hard matchup going against a Vanderbilt team who has 0 bad grades on offense in the advanced metrics and just a ton of good ones. They love running the ball. They have great rushing metrics and success rate, predicted points added, and also explosives in both the ground game and the passing game. And Vandy's defense grades out well in pass down success to limit what is already an iffy LSU air attack, which really is iffy because of their running game. Games aren't played on paper. If it was, I'd lay Vandy up to a touchdown. But I do like Vanderbilt regardless because LSU on the road does worry me, even if it is a Vanderbilt place that is not known for their great environment. The Doors have had 2 weeks to reflect on that Bama game and get ready to bounce back. All the reports from Clark Lee and their practices have been that they've responded very well. Having that extra week off, I think, was big for them. And one loss in the SEC for Vanderbilt is not too many to, derail the season by any means because they know they're still alive for both the SEC race and the playoff race. Vanderbilt, I know, but they are. I like Vandy, honestly, 24-13 in this game. I think it's a good showing from Vandy's defense. I think LSU's offense, if they were going to turn a corner, it would have happened at home last week against Carolina when they had a bye week to reflect. And it just hasn't happened yet. So I'm not sure there really is a corner to turn for LSU. I think they are who they are at this point. I think Vandy can control time possession with their running attack and kind of wear down LSU's defense, which has looked good all year. But I think that Vandy can get them this week. So give me Vandy to win this game against LSU and move to 6-1. Oklahoma at South Carolina is the next one we're going to go for. This line opened up at Oklahoma -3 on Sunday. By the time I went to bed on Sunday, it was 5.5 in favor of the Sooners, total at 42.5. These are the worst two teams at running the ball in the SEC. Oklahoma is at 3.48 yards per carry, Carolina at 3.19. Both teams are coming in off of a loss. Oklahoma's offense was totally stifled by a desperate Texas team, but that defense is still incredible, and Carolina was shut down by a great LSU defense on the road. So in theory, it's a bounce-back spot for both, but at home, that's kind of where you see bounce-back spots really come to fruition. And South Carolina, desperate at home, is a story that we've seen play out many times before. That said, I don't know how Carolina scores in this game because Oklahoma's defense is unreal. Great success rates for the Sooners across the board in predicted points added, havoc rate, rush stats, points per opportunity, literally everything except for explosives. And explosives are really what Carolina relies on to score at this point. Can they strike 2 or 3 times in this game? We saw against LSU, they had a 65-yard run for their only touchdown of the game, and we know that Nick Harbor can take the top off of a defense if they fall asleep. Can Oklahoma regroup? because coming off that Red River loss, that is going to be an emotionally draining loss. You were undefeated, you were top 6 in the country, you had Mateer coming back, and they just couldn't do anything. So how do they regroup? How do they bounce back? What's their mentality going on the road to Columbia here? Because this is a much weaker defense in South Carolina than it was against Texas that they played last week. So it's a better matchup. I do think Oklahoma State will travel. And for John Mateer, his problem last week, I don't think was his health. I think it was just the lack of reps he had because of the surgery. He was out of the game for a while. He wasn't quite back in the flow. And that Texas team is impossible to really, be a fallback spot like, okay, I'll get comfortable here. You just can't do that against Texas' defense. Something about this spot, though, for South Carolina worries me. It is Cocktober, and Oklahoma has to go to Columbia. I'm going to tentatively pick Oklahoma probably by just one score. I'm not overly confident, but I do think that Oklahoma's defense is good enough to where they're able to win this game. The 5.5 is a tricky number because this game could be just out by 3 or 4 points. I think it's close. I think it's one possession, but I'll take Oklahoma to get back on the winning side of things this week. Tennessee goes to Alabama. Bama's laying 8.5 with a total at 58.5. Bama's defense is coming off making Bo Pribula and Missouri look very pedestrian. And they were by far the best team that Missouri had played. So, right, Missouri wasn't really battle-tested before they played Alabama. Tennessee is. They had to play Georgia. They had to go to Mississippi State, which is not a slouch of a defensive unit to play, especially in Starkville. And they scored at least 34 points in every single game. They had 44 at home against Georgia, 41 at Mississippi State. Tennessee's offense is just ridiculous. But they also are a little beat up at running back. I'm wondering about Deshaun Bishop's health. He's their leading rusher. And Josh Heupel wasn't concerned about it being a long-term injury, but is it an injury where he's only 70% this week? Because they need him to be 100%. Bama shut down Ahmad Hardy, who is the best running back, I think, in the country. So if Deshaun Bishop isn't fully healthy, I think Bama can shut him down too. And Tennessee does have other guys like Star Bishop and Peyton Lewis, but Bishop really is the workhorse of that room. If it comes down to Thomas and Lewis running the ball, I think Bama can contain them pretty well. But now Bama's defense, they do give up explosive passes. So Tennessee and Josh Heupel are absolutely licking their chops looking at that because of what Joey Aguilar is able to do with those receivers downfield and how they're able to take the top off of just about everybody. This is only the second true road game for the Volunteers. And Tuscaloosa is going to be a better environment than Starkville was. So I want to see how Tennessee's offense responds to that. Because this is I believe this is a primetime game in Tuscaloosa. And it really is a style clash here. Because Bama has been playing games in the 20s, Tennessee's been up in the 30s and 40s. So which team wins that? Where is this game played? Is it going to be played where points are a bit more of a premium and a touchdown is a big swing? Or is this up and down the field, which would favor Tennessee because that's what they're used to doing? And in the last 4 years, this rivalry has been such a streaky rivalry where teams are winning 5 to 8 games in a row all the time. Last 4 years, it's just been the home team, just back and forth. Tennessee, Bama, Tennessee, Bama. We got it back in Tuscaloosa. I think that stays true. I would be scared to bet money on Bama with 8 in the hook, just because Tennessee's offense can score from wherever. Right, so you could be up by 14 with a minute and a half left. Boom, you're beat because Aguilar hit Brazel over the top. So I'd be scared to bet that number for Bama as high as it is. But I want to take Bama at home, maybe something like 31-24. So a little bit under that total, but I got Bama at home. I think that Ty Simpson and this team has really just turned a corner. They look like one of, if not the best team in the SEC. So give me Bama at home to take down Tennessee in what I think is going to be a pretty entertaining, likely a one-score game. And then finally, where College Game Days at Ole Miss at Georgia. Georgia is favored by 7.5, total of 54.5. This is the 4th straight game for Georgia, and Ole Miss is coming off a bye and their Washington State game last week. I'm not putting a lot of stock into Ole Miss getting a scare from Wazoo last week because it was a total look-ahead spot. You're at Georgia this next week. Ole Miss had to play Wazoo. Wazoo got to play Ole Miss. And when those are the circumstances, it always gets a little scary. Despite that, even before that game was close for Ole Miss last week, I still wasn't sold on them being a true contender in the SEC. And I'm especially not now, right? But Georgia is off an absolute war on the road against Auburn. They get to come home. It's an easier task for Georgia's offense now getting Ole Miss at home than Auburn on the road. It's much easier. We saw Georgia's offense really get stifled for 2.5 quarters. They were able to line up in the second half. Ole Miss has really only been tested, their offense has, by LSU. And they only scored 24 points at home. So how does that translate to the road? I do think LSU's defense, athlete for athlete, pound for pound, is better than Georgia's. But I think the hostile environment is going to play a big part in this game. Because as Trinidad Chambliss ever heard crowd noise like he's going to this week in Athens. Coming from Ferris State up to Ole Miss, he hasn't really had to deal with a hostile environment yet. So I want to see how he reacts to that crowd in Athens. I think Georgia can get got in the downfield passing game defensively, though. We've seen that happen like what happened against Tennessee. And Ole Miss has a positive grade downfield passing with Chambliss and those receivers. But they really need to get Kawan Lacey going to open that up to running back, because if he was great against Washington State, he's had some great games so far this year. He needs to be established and be a proven threat on the ground to open up for Harrison Wallace downfield. Because if they can't run the ball, Chambliss is going to be in handcuffs all night, and that's going to be a problem. So Kawan Lacey, to me, is the most important player for Ole Miss in this matchup. What I'm looking at, though, at the bottom line here is that you have a top 5 team in the country in Ole Miss who's almost a touchdown underdog. I think that in its own tells you what you need to know. I like Georgia a lot in this game. I like them to cover. I think Georgia can win this game by 2 scores and kind of sort of debunk this Ole Miss undefeated, going to Atlanta talk. I don't think Ole Miss makes it to Atlanta, and I think that it starts to come off the rails. Not off the rails, but the SEC championship dreams sort of get derailed this week at Georgia. So give me the Bulldogs. There we go. There are the 8 games. All 16 SEC teams we got to cover in this show. I think it's the first time we got to do that this year. This is going to be a really fun week of football. A lot of good games. And in terms of the coaching thing, as I talked about earlier, I think this could be the last week for Napier. It could be the last week for Freeze. And it might be the last week for Mark Stoops. If all 3 of those teams lose, we could see 3 SEC coaches get fired on Sunday. I'm not sure if that's ever happened, but this could be a really fun week of football. It could be a very consequential week of football. So keep your eyes peeled on everything. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I have been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.